Subscribe to The Honest Critique for current affairs, movie, book, and product reviews. Also, make sure you press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the video series are solely those of the individuals and do not necessarily represent those of The Honest Critique and its employees. The following video contains strong language which may be offensive to some viewers. Viewer discretion advised.
So today we have among us Mr. Anand Arni. He served as a Special Secretary in India's premier intelligence agency, the Research and Analysis Wing. After 37 years of service in R&AW, he retired in 2012 as number 2. In R&AW, he spent over 25 years in dealing with issues related to Pakistan and Afghanistan. He has also dealt with counter-insurgency in the northeast and was a part of the team that was sent to Kandahar to negotiate with the hostage takers of Indian Airlines IC 814 in 1999. Post-retirement, Sir serves at the board on the board of Takshashila Institution as a distinguished fellow of his Geostrategic Program. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. It's a privilege to host you for the interview, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be on this platform.
For our viewers, we'll just give a short background about what happened between America and Taliban recently. So on February 29, they signed a deal. They signed a peace treaty in Qatar, in which Taliban pledged to not provide safe havens to foreign groups, not attack the American groups, and fall in a prisoner swap with the Kabul government. But what we are seeing now that there has been a lot of chaos in the intra-Afghan dialogue. And in that way, there has been a lot of disturbance which has created in the peace deal. So my first question is, what are the probable flaws of the US Taliban Doha peace talks?
A number of them, Siddhant, a lot of them. Actually, it was negotiated keeping the Afghan government in the blind. If you look at the agreement, it's got it virtually recognizes the Taliban, refers to them throughout as, doesn't refer to them as the Taliban, but refers to them as the Islamic State, And hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think, so we call them as Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan, if I'm not wrong.
It's called Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan, which they don't recognize. And that line was mentioned there. It's a little strange type of clause that was used, the framing of that. Apart from that, it made certain commitments. It's all very fine to have an agreement between the US and the Taliban, but it made some commitments on behalf of the Afghan government. There is a release of the 5,000 prisoners, Taliban prisoners, in exchange for 1,500. All through, it's only concessions made. There's been no concession extracted from the Taliban. Absolutely no concession. They refer to themselves as the Islamic Emirate. They do not concede recognizing the Afghan government, and there's no mention about the constitution, which was an issue, or about women's rights. Okay, there's a part statement somewhere about women's rights, but that was not a very satisfactory answer. There is supposed to be two secret annexures which we know nothing about, and the intra-Afghan dialogue was supposed to start once the prisoner exchange took place. It hasn't happened in a fashion that the Taliban would like. The Taliban would have liked all 5,000 handed over. The Afghan government has so far released 940 or something. Another 500 are ready to be handed over. So that's about 1,500. And the Taliban have handed about 150 or getting ready to hand over 150. So it's not very, and of course now we've had this COVID crisis, so there cannot be any face-to-face negotiations. The first round of intra-Afghan dialogue was to take place I think in Germany, and then go to Oslo or something like that. That hasn't really taken place, and that's where it is at. And there have been other hiccups. Maybe we can go into this a little later, or maybe I should say that what has happened in the last 1 week is not very gratifying and not very encouraging. I would think even that there are hurdles now, major hurdles cropping up, and this will probably need a lot of intervention by the Americans to ensure that the agreement goes forward. Of course, you must have all read about the attack in Kabul on the maternity hospital, in which 18 women were killed, and 18, obviously you got 18 children without mothers. And there have been other attacks in other places. It's a Shia hospital. The Taliban has, of course, said that it's not them who are involved. It's the ISIS connected, which is in league with the Afghan intelligence. And the Afghan intelligence has been fast and furious. They have President Ghani has okayed or approved the recommencement of military operations against the Taliban. The Taliban, as of day before yesterday, has also taken a decision to recommence its operations against the Afghan government. So that's where it is. It's back to square one in a sense. But maybe you have other questions and we can go on from there.
So, sir, what is the main challenge, or what are the main challenges of the intra-Afghan dialogues?
The main challenges are you have given the Taliban a platform, and they will pretty much dictate who comes from their side. They will decide. There is no way that you can do it. And the Afghan delegation is going to come as an Afghan delegation. It's not going to come as the delegation of the Islamic Republic. Those are the hitches that's coming up. They have dealt with women. In the last two rounds, there was representation in Doha of the Afghan women. So we presume that they will agree to having that representation. But the intra-Afghan dialogue, much remains to be seen about how the Taliban projects itself. Is it projecting itself as the representative of the Pashtuns, or is it going to represent itself as the Pashtuns, as a segment of a powerful Pashtun lobby? We don't know. That's yet to come up. We haven't even reached that first level. Let the talk start, and then probably we'll have some clarity. And then you have other hiccups, Siddhant. One, what is going to happen to the constitution? It seems to be confusion even among the Taliban about the constitution. From what I gather, they really haven't articulated their position well, except to say that it has to be in conformity with Islam. But there's nowhere is it not in conformity with Islam. And from what I gather, during the short ceasefire that took place last year, the Taliban who came, who interacted, were very surprised. For them, they were given a misconception that there's no Islam at all there, and everything has been closed down. They're surprised to find that mosques were up and running and prayers were on, and there was some semblance of of normalcy in the Islamic world, normalcy in the Islamic phraseology. But that's that. Next, whatever.
Yeah. So as you pointed out, sir, so that you said that if Taliban is adamant on running the Pashtun narrative, or they are going to consolidate other factors as well. So so you said that there are many misunderstandings amidst the Taliban, which says that they don't have a clarity on the constitution themselves. So what can be the probable ways in which the Taliban fighters and the Taliban ideologies can be accommodated and amended in the constitution of Afghanistan?
The Taliban is no longer a monolith. It used to be during Mullah Omar's time, and for a long time there was a semblance of a unity. As I understand, there are as many as 6 groups in the Taliban, and at various points, I believe the Americans were negotiating with them separately too. The platform that's there at Doha, to my sense, represents a number of groups. One is, of course, the old guard of Brother, Mullah Brother, and his lot. Then there is the Haqqani Network's representative, which is also there.
Yeah.
Then I believe that there are representatives of the military group, military commission, which is present. And some hints, we don't know how much of it is true because we really don't have much coverage of this. I believe that a representative of some group which had links with the Iranians was present. And there's been an interesting. None of these people really see things in the same spectacles or the same frame that others see. I mean, each one has a slightly different view. Some view would look at it as a tribal with a tribal influence. Look at it from that point of view, and then of course there are other business interests and a whole lot of things. As of the moment, as we speak, I believe there are some differences which have come to the fore, or at least these are hints coming that the military commission is at odds with the information commission. We don't know. We really don't know because it's a big gap. Maybe the intelligence agencies in Delhi would know, but I, for one, don't really know. I know this much, that it's not united, and even among the leadership, even among the group in Doha, there is Tanakzai, who was educated in India, but represents well, if I can use the phrase, represents the Pakistanis among the Taliban. Then you have Sohail Shaheen, who probably sits midway, where a link comes again from Pakistan, but probably softer. Then you have Mullah Brother, who again spent 8 years in a Pakistani jail. He was negotiating with the Taliban, with Karzai in 2010. Both Karzai and Mullah Brother are from the Populzai tribe, and since that Populzai and since Karzai is the Sardar of the Populzai tribe, he carries a little bit of clout. He not only was a Sardar, he's also the president, but he did negotiate with Brother to disrupt that talks. The Pakistanis arrested Brother in Karachi, and he was in jail for many years. There was one attempt to, I think that was probably in 2014 or 15, when people did go across, when the Afghans managed to get access to Brother. They found him in a sort of a stupor, and there was a lot of speculation that he may have been drugged or whatever. Didn't go ahead. Now he's come, but he looks okay, but his family is in Pakistan, and there's a pressure point. One of his sons is with him, but the rest of his family is in Pakistan. So what I'm trying to get at here is that there isn't much. It's not a coherent. They put across a coherent front in Doha, but that coherence is it's not entirely. It's not united. There are too many factions and too many groups. We'll have to see how it plays out in the coming weeks. As I said, Information Commission and the Military Commission seem to be at odds. That's the latest information. Let's see how it plays out.
So you said that there are multiple division that has happened in Taliban in recent times, and there is an internal conflict between the information and the Information Commission as well as the military wing of the Taliban. And what I can see is Sirajuddin Haqqani's son is also hovering in Qatar these days when the talks were going on, and also there are many Quetta Shura has an active participation in the. How do we say that? How do we see this developments happening in Qatar and then come back to Afghanistan and see how these developments are implemented in Afghanistan.
Qatar was a platform by which Americans could talk to the Taliban.
Yeah.
Um, it is virtually a diplomatic mission of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. I mean, they flew their own
Yes.
flight for a couple of days. They insisted on being referred to as the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which doesn't exist on the ground. And even at its height of glory, it was recognized by only three countries: UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. Now, having a office in Saudi Arabia, the Taliban did not want it. Having these talks, this Doha talks, having the talks in Pakistan was not something that anybody fancied. And the UAE was also ruled out for other similar reasons. Uh, it had to be Doha. It was Doha which came up as an offer, and it was acceptable to both the Pakistanis, both the Taliban and the Americans. Um, what does the Taliban actually represent in terms of Afghanistan? Everybody claims that they control 50% of Afghanistan or maybe more. You can control. These are statistics of roadblocks and things like that. If a particular road is blocked for a day or two, the area south of that is thought to be under Taliban control. So actual Taliban control would only be in a few districts. I mean, if you look at it at full pledge, okay. If you say that control means governance, then Taliban governance is only there in a couple of districts along the Durand line, maybe 10, 15%. Um, and if you ask me how much does the Taliban represent, I can't give you a figure on it, but I would say that a wild guess would be, again, if you have popular elections, which is never going to happen, the Taliban is not going to secure more than 10 to 15%. So what does the Taliban represent, except a body which is encouraged by Pakistan? That is the central figure. Yes, the very fact that they've existed for so many years without being entirely wiped out does say that they have some locus standi, but not the manner in which it's being played out, not the manner in which it's played out. Yeah.
Okay. So as the disputes have emerged in the intra-Afghan dialogues, because Ashraf Ghani said that prisoner swap cannot be a requisite to the talks, while it should be a part of the negotiation. But Taliban at the same time is rejecting this claim of Ashraf Ghani, and then we see that there is sometimes the prisoner swap is happening and then it's collapsing again. So what are the main reasons of these irregularities that are occurring
Okay.
on a very
Okay.
occasional basis in the intra-Afghan dialogue?
The prisoner swap was supposed to be, I mean, the Ashraf Ghani's initial position, or the Afghan government's initial position, was that a prisoner swap is an agreement between the Taliban and the Afghan government. Who have got these prisoners? It's Taliban on one hand and the Afghan government. And the fact that the Americans conceded so much ground on this is something they're not very comfortable with. They said that it should flow from the intra-Afghan dialogue, not be front-ended, that you release first and then you talk. So that is why they went into this piecemeal figure and this partial, not released everybody and this thing released, I think. They came under enormous American pressure to start the whole thing. The deal was predicated on this sort of a prisoner exchange. And it's a commitment the Americans made without consulting the Afghan government. It was not in their remit to negotiate for the Afghans, and they did it. So it's one area which has created some amount of confusion. Ashraf Ghani did go along eventually, he did give in, and then he decided he'll do it in a piecemeal fashion. So that's the situation, that's where it is at. Each side is trying to carve out as much space as they can for their respective positions. Yeah.
So a major concern being highlighted post the Qatar talks is that the US has betrayed the democratically elected Afghan government, as you were mentioning, by negotiating with the Taliban, and it could lead to a sudden reprise of the Taliban. What are your views on that?
Yes, the government of Afghanistan was undermined. The Americans really did take them for granted in negotiating this deal. Zalmai Khalilzad says he consulted them at many points, but I'm not sure it was presented as a whole to them. They were shown the agreement, but not allowed to discuss it at the end. If you ask me, will it lead to to strengthening the Taliban? I would say probably. It would. You already see the Taliban a lot more aggressive. Let's go into this position actually. The Taliban, whom do they represent? They represent these Pashtuns. They're largely a Pashtun body, which is in southern Afghanistan, which does not represent the majority of Afghanistan. They're the single largest community, but not the majority. They have been making major inroads in the north now. They had control over, as I said, districts in the south along the Durand line, that is in the east and in the south. Now you see actions in Pashtun pockets in the north, which is Kunduz. You see a lot of activity in the Wakhan corridor area. This to me, it looks as if the Taliban is now looking at grabbing territory. It's not the Taliban of the old, which had what it, when I say Taliban of the old, the Taliban which existed as of a couple of months ago, when they had control over key pockets and were content with that. Now they're getting a little more ambitious and trying to take territory, which is a new phenomenon, which is not entirely new, but under the present circumstances, it's a more aggressive stance.
So, when we talk about US's involvement in Afghanistan from the last 19 years, like primarily from the last 19 years, so there are arguments that are being emerged among the veterans of the US Armed Forces community that what is the main reason that we're in Afghanistan? Why are we still fighting? Are we really winning the war? These are the main questions that are raised by the veterans who have actually served on the front in Afghanistan. And I would also like to mention General Owens once saying that this war is absolutely unwinnable, and the whole idea of negotiating with the Taliban is just for the Americans to get back home in an honorable fashion. So how do you see this going on the term in the American perspective?
The Americans went about it in the Americans entered Afghanistan as somewhat of a side thing. 9/11 happened, and they needed the Americans wanted to counter that, but they got distracted. Having beaten the Taliban, they didn't finish it. Having pushed the Taliban out, they should have really gone in for a greater consolidation. Instead, they got diverted to Iraq and allowed the Taliban to regroup. If it is unwinnable, I agree from the American perspective, for one reason, that is, they are not prepared to confront the actual source of the problem. Actual source of the problem is much what's happening, sanctuaries and assistance being provided by Pakistan. They find themselves, for some strange reason, hampered by having to do something in that direction. They all know what is the answer, but there isn't that will there. You're right about one thing. The American attention has gone, or at least it's changed. US Congress, for the first time, has a number of veterans, a larger number of veterans than ever before, both veterans from Iraq, Afghanistan, I mean, army veterans. And they all see this as a futile war, a war in which they have no stakes, a war in which they went with different aims and now they're called upon to do for nation building, which is something that they don't have and don't want to do. Let me say that they're great at winning wars, but short on building institutions. They push the presidential form of government over. You couldn't have objected at Bonn because that was not the platform to object. The Americans had won the war, but there's a lot of advice, well-meaning advice tendered to them by a lot of people that what you need is a representation. What you need is to recognize the reality of Afghanistan and look at it as a power-sharing arrangement. You need to have you need to have some representation of the Pashtuns and the North that's a power sharing arrangement that you have to look at. And a Westminster type of arrangement would have been better suited. And the Westminster side type of arrangement was working well in all the neighboring countries of Afghanistan, India, or SARC, all the other countries. But the Americans thought that power sharing meant giving some sort of a representation to the communities, and then decided to have a presidential form of elections of governance without political parties being present, and just have two vice presidents, one of whom the two of them will represent different. So again, I'm digressing, but the whole issue here is that nation building was never a focus. It was just a military operation and a war on terror. And once they got what they wanted, Osama bin Laden, everybody in my community knew that it's just a matter of time now before they pull out.
So what you're trying to say here is that America clearly failed to recognize the power structure that exists in Afghanistan, which is very different from other regions. So I remember talking to one of my friends there in Kabul, who happens to be a prominent politician in Afghanistan. So he told me that when Americans came, instead of sowing the seeds of democracy, they resisted on planting the trees of democracy. So that was something which is very, very valuable as a feedback when it comes to game. So what I can see is that United States has clearly failed in Afghanistan, if we have to put it in some or the other way. And in that way, we have the next question ready. So Ratnadeep will ask the next question.
So we all know Pakistan's link with Afghanistan, where a lot of Mujahideens have been trained in Pakistan and crossed border to wage war against the government. And we know Pakistan has been indirectly involved with Taliban, helping them militarily. So Pakistan calls itself a facilitator or observer of the peace talks. But according to you, how do you believe the Pakistan factor should be addressed and assessed here?
I really don't have many ideas on how do you address the Pakistani factor. I would think that the time for addressing the Pakistani factor had come a long time ago. That was during before they started playing around again. Sometime up to 2005, they lost that opportunity. Then we also lost the opportunity in negotiating with the Taliban at that point. If you ask me, the only answer for this sort of is carrots and stick, really literally, in the context of Pakistan. Pakistan is really no economic condition is no state to make any demands. dire financial straits, and I think that's one pressure point that the Americans did not use, or even if they tried to use, they never really. They started giving into blackmail fairly early, uh, and that you had that great. I'd like to call the word tamasha. You had American uh, prisoners of war on in Afghan in Taliban hands, and don't tell me that they were sitting in Afghanistan. That's nonsense. They were sitting in some uh, places in Pakistan, and I don't know how the Americans allowed themselves to be convinced that the Pakistanis only had a exercise limited control over the Taliban. The Americans could have done anything they wanted to in the context of the Taliban. You know that that's the way they do it. They could have got these people released whenever they wanted to. They played games all along. Starting with Osama bin Laden. For 5 years, he was one of their guests, and again, you have these stories about which America seems to have convinced itself that the Al Qaeda, or at least it's convenient for them to believe that the Al Qaeda is active in parts of the subcontinent. I have a great deal of when I say subcontinent, I meant Pakistan. I have a great deal of respect for the ISI. I cannot believe that the Al Qaeda will have sanctuaries in Pakistan and the ISI doesn't know about it. I cannot believe that Ayman al-Zawahiri is running around free in Pakistan. He's definitely under some similar situation arrangement, if he's alive, as Osama bin Laden was enjoying.
Exactly.
Let's call it. The Americans need to call the bluff. They didn't.
But yeah, so I mean, you said about Ayman al-Zawahiri, the 2IC of Osama bin Laden, and I remember President Musharraf saying on record that things happen in the intelligence agencies, things go wrong, and when he was asked about Osama bin Laden's capture from Abbottabad, and his one statement was, not every time we are able to see things, and ISI has the right to sleep as well. So I think there were many speculations that were running around the press that time when President Musharraf made that statement that ISI has the right to sleep sometimes. And that gave us a very clear view of what he was trying to implicate, because in the same interview he's also said that how our boys were running the Al Qaeda camps there. I mean, yeah. So what you're trying to say is Pakistan intelligence agency been aware of what are happening in most of the places and in Pakistan. So, sir, what is the main intention of Pakistan here? That is not visible enough. That is wants to achieve through the whole Afghan theater.
If you go and if you listen to the gossip, or if you listen to, it is the gossip in which comes to you from Pakistan. I'm not saying I have any access. It's just that what I am hearing from second-hand sources, great deal of euphoria that we defeated the Russians first. They don't concede that they used the Afghans to defeat the Russians, and now they're defeating the Americans. And this is the sense of the Americans. You know that phrase which they use. We know he's a bastard, but he's our bastard. That sort of a phraseology. We also know what the Americans really think about the Pakistanis. We also have heard Mike Mullen talking about the Taliban about the Haqqani network being the veritable arm of the Pakistanis. Americans say there is only so much you can push. I think they're worried about the nukes. They're worried about if you push Pakistan too hard, it could genuinely become a rogue nation. It is at the tipping point, so we have to calibrate all our moves to ensure that Pakistan turns the corner and becomes a good boy now. Yeah, so you can argue this way and that way, but someday you got to face the truth. Someday you got to have the guts to face the truth. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it's called, if guts is the right word. It's not in this phraseology. You've got to have a plan on how to confront Pakistan and implement it.
I, sir, personally believe that the Musharraf's way of dealing with issues, be it on Pakistan's eastern front or the western front, were very, very effective and positive compared to the today modern army generation of General Bajwa. What would you like to say about it? Like, I remember Mr. Dulat, the former R&AW chief, talking about Musharraf's 4-point lesson, 4-point proposal that he proposed to Mr. Vajpayee and later on to Mr. Dr. Manmohan Singh. And that was very much accepted within our community, within your community, if I'm not wrong. And how do you see that link, which was the niyat he was talking about in Kashmir? Like, I would like to say that, I remember him saying to Dr. Manmohan Singh that you are a Pakistani born Sikh and I'm an Indian born Muslim. So that was a very nice narrative that he was trying to create that time, and it was very, very warmly welcomed. So how would you like to comment on that?
What was, this is not, yeah, there were two Musharrafs. One is the Musharraf who came to power, and the other is a Musharraf which evolved over a passage of time. What was the reason for the evolution? I mean, most Pakistani army chiefs, if you talk to them in private, or I've had the luck to talk to a couple of them after they've retired, will tell you how we have to move forward. We can't continue in this fashion that we are, and we have to find a solution. There are Pakistani politicians who will tell you also, jo hisab ke paas hai, you keep what you have and we'll keep what we have. That's the only solution. This man Musharraf evolved into going closer to the second one. Why and how? Okay, most army chiefs may have views on this, but will not go along because they represent the institution and they don't necessarily represent their own views. That their own views are of less importance. They have to think about the Pakistan army and the security and safety of the nation. So generally, they're there for 2 years. By the time when they come in, they're under a great deal of pressure in those 2 years that they are there. First 1 year is under, implementing your predecessor's, whatever his plans were. And contrary to what means, there is a great deal of consensus in the Pakistan army. The views which the army chief represents is the views of the corps commanders group. So the corps commanders which he has when he comes to power are those he's inherited from his predecessor, who has planted everybody and gone away. The next, he spends a year in replacing, getting his own men in, and by the time he does all that games, he just has a small window of 4 or 5 months before he enters the lame duck phase. So most army chiefs don't want to do anything. They don't want to rock the boat. They're in the status quo. It's maybe a little this way or that way, but they generally follow the same line. In Musharraf's case, he was a dictator. I think he realized at some point that he will have to step down from the army, in which case his position would be strongly weakened. And I think he recognized that if he does solve the problem between India and Pakistan, he could he could probably become a genuine civilian president, not an army installed president. Or let me just say this, I mean, that is not really valid. If he had solved the issue he would have had greater chance to stay on. And that is why he propounded his 4-point formula, which was actually a sensible idea. And no, sensible is also again not the correct phrase. It was one way forward. There are 100 ways you can solve the Kashmir issue. It depends on what you really want to do. But this is one way forward that could have worked. It looked at narrowing the problem, narrowing the border issue, narrowing the area of conflict to the valley, and then having some sort of joint mechanisms, all mechanisms which for river waters, and nothing really which encroaches on the state, or at least as we perceive governance of the state. And it could have worked if there is intent. Our greatest problem was terrorism and Pakistani jihadi, export of Pakistani jihadi from that side. So no matter what Musharraf was prepared to do, it was only, we still had to be convinced that Musharraf was going to be genuine in respecting what he had to be proposed. So that's where the area is. Okay, Musharraf is genuine. Musharraf, as long as he's there, ensures that there is sanctity and there is nothing happening across the border. Once he goes, it could go back to the old thing, and we would have probably had it over Siachen and various other areas. And there was that said, I would still say it's a line that we could still explore. It's a line that needed to be explored, largely because it reduces the area of conflict. That's the thing. Yeah, next.
So if we can come a bit closer to the home, and I can ask you a question around the same line as you're talking about Kashmir. The question is basically about, in 1990s, the early 1990s, we have seen a lot of foreign fighters coming in Kashmir. And we have seen what happened around the entire region, around the entire period. This was one of the most bloodiest and the most dangerous period in the history of Kashmir and as well as India. So, with this recent peace talk, if the Taliban doesn't have a strong war hold in Afghanistan, do you see that 1990s thing coming back to India, since India's policy in Kashmir is being more stricter and with the abrogation of Article 370? Do you think more foreign fighters coming in?
Foreign fighters really didn't come in large numbers in the 1990s. Yes, they did. There were some cases. Sometimes some people give figures as low as 19, and some people give more. It was a double-edged sword. You were getting foreign mercenaries coming in and fighting a war on behalf of somebody else. It wouldn't have worked. Kashmiri, it would have worked only in a limited sense. It would have only created more problems. It wouldn't have been. It could have created problems for the Indian state. But I don't think they could have fought a liberation war, and I don't think the Kashmiris really wanted foreign outsiders to come in. That said, that's what's said. And in the context of Afghanistan, I didn't see any Afghan in Pakistan, in Kashmir. No Afghan came to fight in Kashmir. Maybe if you really scratch down, Sajjad Afghani is a name everybody talks about, but I think Sajjad Afghani is more, is a Pakistani who calls himself Afghani. And there could be some people from there may be a few. I'm not saying that. You can always pick up a mercenary or two. If tomorrow something happens, you can always go, like you get suicide bombers, you can definitely buy up a couple of people and send them in there if that is the game. But it's not that it's the Afghan, there isn't an Afghan ideology to get involved in, or isn't any reason for the Afghans to get involved in a battle in Kashmir. The Kashmir issue is not as emotive there as it is, say, in parts of Pakistan. It's not a major, I'm not overly concerned about. What would concern me is the fact that the Taliban, the Afghanistan theater could be used to train some of our own people, to battle harden some of our people, to use Pakistanis, to give them training and then pump them into Kashmir. When I say we already are aware of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, which was active in Kashmir, is now more active in Afghanistan. If there comes a point, when the Lashkar, when the Lashkar is no longer needed in Afghanistan, where do you divert them? I'm sure Pakistan wouldn't want them sitting in their territory in various camps. They'd like to use them elsewhere. And the temptation will be too great to use them in Kashmir as a means to keep them out of trouble. That's the fear I have. I personally don't think Afghans will come across, or other foreigners will really come across in any large numbers. Maybe a few, but that's about it. But then, of course, we have to be careful of the few. The few that come in could give you, could add value to your thing, like making, people with some expertise in making bombs, making IEDs, stuff like that. Even the Pulwama type of attack where a car bomb was used. Making a car bomb is not a simple thing. Everyone thinks putting explosives in a car and driving it will do something. No, it has to be a simultaneous detonation which needs some sort of expertise. And that sort of thing can come in. That's my worry. That's the only worry I have. Yeah.
So, talking about the 4-point formula and Kashmir and things like that. So we will have it reserved for the later part of the session. So I will just take you back to the Afghan theater and discuss about Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad. Sir, you have met Mr. Khalilzad, the ambassador for the special.
I met him only once. That's it.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure.
So exactly. So for the viewers, I would like to say Ambassador Khalilzad is an American diplomat of Afghan ancestry, and he is the special representative of the Afghan reconciliation policy for the Americans. So recently, Ambassador Khalilzad has been very much in conversation in India. And I'm sure you know the reason, because he has been making secret visits to India and telephone calls with Jaishankar, who is our External Affairs Minister. So what can we learn from that? What are the implications from the ambassador's visit to India and his conversation with our External Affairs Minister?
I think the last visit of his was really to get us more involved in talking to the Taliban. There is some desperation on everybody's part to get us to talk to the Taliban. So Zalmay Khalilzad came there. Maybe they feel that if India starts talking to the Taliban, it will be an acceptance of the Taliban's position and will strengthen their hand. Maybe they feel that as long as India does not talk to the Taliban, it stiffens the backbone of the Afghan government, and they're standing up to the Taliban. Maybe a combination of various factors, but they are desperate to get us to. They have been pushing the line that we should talk to the Taliban, and the Taliban is also sort of sending signals they'd like to talk to us.
Yeah. Sir, I was asking, you said that there is an urge, everyone is seeing the urge for India to get into conversation with the Taliban. And two questions that I quickly get for the follow-up is that how does Taliban sees the Indians, and how do we get into direct participation in the negotiation?
How do the Taliban see the Indians? I don't think there's any. I don't think. Okay, they are like any other Afghan in that sense. They are not. They look at us as a force in the area. There are different views. Some people in the Taliban would look at us as a counterbalance to Pakistan. Some people would see that's exactly what I said earlier. Some Taliban would see us as, if we talk to them, it'll give them legitimacy. These are the factors that govern. I don't think there's any animus in that sense there, or there is a sort of a they see us as a powerful figure in the region, and they would like us to to treat them, to agree to talk to them. That is the only thing about the Taliban that I can see on. As I said, Taliban is not monolith. There are people, there are factions. The Haqqani network would know that we would never ever think of talking to them after the attack on the Indian mission in Kabul. There are others probably in the military commission. Even in the military commission, I would see there'll be one or two figures who may not necessarily be anti-Indian. It remains to be seen. How are we convinced that people like Brother and others are really what we think them to be? That is, Afghans first and foremost. That's our thing. That's what we need to gauge.
Yes, sir. So the second part of the same question was, how do we get into direct participation in the negotiation? As you said that there is an urge for everyone, for India to be talking to the Taliban. So how do we get into direct participation in the whole theater?
I don't think I'd be an advocate in talking to the Taliban in a manner in which it gives them legitimacy. And I don't think we should talk to the Taliban unless the Afghans ask us to do so. We haven't reached that pass as yet. I don't think if the Taliban is not talking to the Afghan government is hardly going to be asking us to talk to the Taliban. So I think that's not been reached as yet. Now, what are the concessions that the Taliban have? I don't see any concession that the Taliban has made for us to want to go along that path of talking to them. They have shown that they have not shown that they have changed their views. They are obscurantists living in a different world. There probably modernity, some amount of modernity has now devolved on them. Probably they're a different lot, but I don't see much vision on that. I don't see any articulation of the Taliban's objections to the constitution, which are valid. I don't see much more. Okay, they have made on the issue of women, they have made some noises and some move forward, but it's inadequate in my sense. They need to do a lot more, and they've shown themselves to be ruthless and bloodthirsty. Bloodthirsty is wrong. Ruthless, and I am not comfortable with that. I also feel that the Americans are falling for it when they say that one of the issues in the famous Doha peace accord is that they will guarantee that there will be no foreign groups operating or sponsored terrorism there. Okay, if I am to believe the Taliban and say it is not their thing, they were not involved in what happened in Kabul last week, then where is the guarantee?
Yeah, I was coming to that only. Yeah.
They can't guarantee. There is no way that the Taliban can guarantee that foreign groups will not involve. And there is no reaching out to us. They have not made any given any assurances that groups hostile to India will not be allowed to work in Afghanistan. They have said America and its allies, groups operating. We are not an ally in the formal sense of the word. The allies are those basically who took part in the war on terror. So that's not. It is not a very satisfactory, exposition of their thing. I don't think we can go along at this point. I don't think we should go along, frankly, even if we have to sink all our views or bury all our views. I don't think we should go along as long as the Afghan government has not asked us to. If they ask us, that's a different matter. Then we should look at different realities and look at it. Let's see. They know, the Afghans know that everything that we have done is for the Afghans. The Taliban know that everything we have done has been for the Afghans. The Dilaram Zaranj road, which they are using extensively, is been there. The Salma Dam, hydro projects, electricity in Kabul, the agricultural, the university in Kandahar, the new parliament building. Nothing is aimed against them. And that recognition is not there as yet.
So I also wanted to ask from here, I wanted, for the sake of our viewers, to give you a background of the Islamic State of Khorasan province and what are the possible collaborations possible with the Taliban and the operational tactics and future assessments.
That will take me another session in itself. If you started me off on an issue which I've been following fairly for quite some time. But let's say this, let's start in 2014. I'm not going to give you all my thing, but just briefly. 2014, when the Vilayat Khorasan, or what's today called the Islamic State of Khorasan, came into existence. It came into existence in Waziristan. Formed by a group of people from the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which was against the Pakistani state, against the ISI, and against Pakistan Army and the ISI. As part of the Zarbe, the other operation, they're pushed out of Waziristan. And they were pushed out of Waziristan, and they moved into sanctuaries in Afghanistan. And their enemies remain the same. Their adversaries remain the same. The Pakistani state and the ISI, and they added a new one, a representative of the Pakistani state and ISI, that is the Taliban. These were their adversaries. And in their when the Tehreek-e-Taliban came here, they were joined by others who were driven out of Waziristan. Some few Uyghurs, the Islamic movement of Afghanistan, of Uzbekistan, and the Harkatul of Tajikistan, not Ansar, the Tajik group. They were all got together and worked with the Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan in doing this. Somewhere else, this would continue till about 2016. They had by then managed to get Baghdadi's imprimatur support in a recognition as the Islamic State of Khorasan. But here we come to I must bring in here that the Islamic State is largely Arab in nature. It doesn't never really looked at the non-Arab world. Neither has the Al-Qaeda really in its original form looked at all these constructs which have come, the Ginwa, Hind and all that is something that which I would question. Anyway, leave that aside. That's more related to the Al-Qaeda, and that's not really the issue here. So, at the present moment, my own sense is that the ISIS is like a call center. You go and feed in information saying that, look, we have established a branch of the ISIS in Bangalore and we want your recognition. So they say, all right. And then they say, today I've gone and conducted an operation and these are the photographs of the operation. And they say, all right, and they put it on their media channels. It serves everybody's purpose to believe that. But there is no command and control emanating from Syria, which is extending to Afghanistan. So that's that. Then in 2016, or was it? No, 2016 they came back. So 2017, roughly, the Pakistanis decided to, no, before that there is an incident, I must bring it to your notice, that no, but that's not really connected to ISIS, so let's leave that aside for the moment. In 2016 or 17, the Pakistanis started showing a great deal of interest in the Islamic front. They tried to convey to everybody that the ISIS has come to stay in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and it's a threat to the region as a whole. And they've got subnational, they've got national views, transnational ambitions, and all that. This was sold very seriously by the Pakistanis, and a number of people, even in our media, started lapping it up and all that. But again, my own argument is that I have a very healthy regard for the ISI, and we are very happy that we have a buffer zone between India and Afghanistan, and that's called Pakistan. So for the ISIS to come to India, it has to go via Pakistan, and we are pretty sure that the ISI can handle it. Anyway, that's more flippantly said. But anyway, they started showing interest in the ISK, and in 2018 or so, some Lashkar-e-Toiba activists joined the ISK. These were elements who had gone with Maulvi Faruqi and his lot. There were about 150 people who went across to Syria and are said to have fought alongside the ISIS, and then they came back. How they went and how they came back is something that I find a little intriguing, but they came back and then they joined the ISK in Fata area, or at least were active there. And then, when I say active, not active against the Pakistani state, but made their presence felt there. And then they came across here. And in 2000, there is a dispute whether Maulvi Faruqi took over the ISK in 2019 or 2018. Antonio Gustosi says 2018. My own feeling is closer to 2019. He took charge of the ISK in a manner which clearly showed Pakistani interference. One is he's a Lashkar-e-Toiba activist, and everybody in the world knows that Lashkar is connected to the ISI. So for the ISK, which is originally against the Pakistani state, to have agreed to allow the thing itself is a stretch. Two, he's an Afridi. He is Lashkar, yes, but he's an Afridi. Lashkar is predominantly Pakistani Punjabi, but this man is a Pathan from there. There are quite a few Pathans, but he's an Afridi, and which means he speaks the language, and he was put in charge. It's a perfect solution for Pakistan. You have a Pashtun-speaking head of the ISK who is a Pakistani and who's from the Lashkar. You can't have a better solution than that. But the manner in which he was made was in exchange for certain conditions. The Pakistanis agreed to provide sanctuaries for the ISK if A, they conducted no operations on Pakistani soil, B, agreed to accept Maulvi Faruqi as their leader. So this was conceded, and this created a lot of tension within the ISK. They held that it was refuting the ideals from which they came. The one group which was the foreigner element, which is pushed out of Waziristan, would have nothing to do with Maulvi Faruqi. So the ISK, in a sense, split into two. A small group of between 200 and 400 people. I don't have any accurate figures. Went under the charge of Tajik, I think. Yes, a Tajik called Shafiev. I think his actual name is Shafiev, but recalls himself Muawiyah. broke away and became operational in parts of the north. For them, it is perfect solution for Muawiyah's group. Uh, I mean, operating in that area, because their target area is really Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Fergana Valley, and that was with what their dreams are. So for them to be operative on the northern half of Afghanistan was more important. And the group which was active in Kunar and other things were under Maulvi Faruqi is a separate entity. What has happened in the last month or so is very intriguing. After the Gurdwara attack, which is attributed to the ISK, the ISK, the NDS launched operations against ISK, and in the operations conducted, Faruqi and 18 others were captured in Kandahar. Now, this is intriguing. Kandahar is definitely out of their area of operations. Can't bring in a Afridi from Kandahar, from Waziristan, and expect him to make a home. Expect him to find sanctuary in Kandahar. Can't have 19 ISK peoples, being captured without a firefight, without a fight. These are supposed to be ISK people who would be armed and fighting there. I also find it a stretch in my imagination for a group of foreigners, essentially foreigners, operating both either in Kandahar or Kabul. ISK doesn't have that sophistication to operate inside. To operate, it doesn't mean you and I, if we have some amount of military training, we can probably think that we can go and operate somewhere else, but it's not so simple. You need bases, you need safe houses, you need a knowledge of terrain, you need a lot of things. You can't walk around in Kabul with guns in your hand. Somebody has to bring the guns. You have to come across to Kabul in some clandestine manner. All these things are there. It's just not one or two. It's a whole string of things. So even that Gurdwara issue, I have reservations. I am not entirely prepared to accept that it is the ISK. Maybe it's a tactics of it falls in line with their type of tactics, because they've done this before, attacking Shias in the hospital and foreigners.
But also.
Yeah, but it doesn't serve their purpose in any sense to fight these people. They don't have that. Literally, they do not. I don't think they can operate in that manner inside Kabul. So anyway, that's another aside that will have to be kept for another day. For me, at least, the jury is out. But there has been an effective split in the thing. For 19 people to be captured by the Taliban, by the Afghans, suggests to me that it's more of a surrender, or it could be possible that these people were already in touch with the Taliban, with the Afghan government, and or decided to break away. We don't know. There could be a whole lot of stories in this. The Pakis seem to want Maulvi Faruqi back urgently, because I suspect he knows a lot more. He knows a lot, and this is what the Afghans have been hinting at. Faruqi himself, we don't know what his motivation is. So it's a mixed bag now about the ISK. There is, of course, a story that the Pakis did not allow him to cross the border on the eastern side, and therefore he had to come to Kandahar to cross from the southern side, cross back. He's an Afridi. I don't buy that story. An Afridi can cross. Afridis are on both sides of the eastern border of the Duran. They can cross when they want to. There is really no thing. There is a border fencing, and it's fairly good, I'm told. But there are ways in which I don't buy that story in any sense. I think it's more of either a surrender or it's a long-time operation of the NDS, or I don't know, whatever. So that's it. What I'm trying to get here is, at the end of the day, I think the much more is being made of the ISK than is warranted. The IS, it serves Pakistani purposes to have an anonymous entity, an entity on which they can blame it. Hitherto, it used to be the Haqqani network, that anything that the Taliban was not responsible for, I mean, particularly gruesome things could be attributed to the Haqqani network. And about 4 years ago, we heard that they were trying to groom another organization, and this seems to be pretty much this organization. The Haqqani network has gravitated from being unacceptable to being more acceptable. The Americans are definitely trying to rehabilitate him. Otherwise, there couldn't have been that famous op-ed by Sirajuddin Haqqani, Sirajuddin Haqqani in New York Times. Then they're trying to mainstream the Haqqani network. There are rumors, enough rumors appearing, enough leaks taking place that they are actually driving the Doha talks, and they are very constructive and useful and all that. So the Haqqani network have become good boys now. So you need some bad boys. In the event that the Taliban come to power in Kabul, you need a group which can do certain things, or which without tainting the name of the Taliban. So I think this is what it's come, the new one, the ISK.
Okay, sir. That was very, very insightful and very informative, and I hope the viewers get the best out of it. So you said about ISK emerging from factions of TTP, and it is emerging from KPK and Waziristan. One more issue that can be traced in the historical relations of Afghanistan and Pakistan is the issue of Pashtunistan, which has always emerged since 1948, since 1947. I'm sorry. So that particular issue has been highlighted even recently as one of their very prominent leaders of the PTA movement by the Pakistan military. So what relevance does the whole movement and the Pashtunistan issue has in the insurgency going in Afghanistan and Pakistan?
I haven't really paid much attention to the PTM, apart from what's coming. It's not been much of my thing. But I can tell you this, that the issue of Pashtunistan is the issue of Pashtun subnationalism is something that scares the shits out of the Pakis. They're worried about it. They don't want to. Part of the reason for strategic depth, a large part of the reason for their wanting, the whole concept of Afghanistan has been very much mired in their thing. There was Fraser Tytler, who at the time of partition, a British historian, who predicted that one day there will be a fusion, not a fusion. What's the word he used? Maybe fusion between Pakistan and Afghanistan. That it's an unnatural construct. It will go back. Afghanistan will merge with Pakistan, and that sort of concept has gone along in the history, in different phases in Pakistani history. Strategic depth, confederation, federation, all Ayub Khan's confederation, all sorts of theses have gone, and now, of course, now the thing that has come, strategic depth in a different fashion is being articulated now. All this is the basis of all this concerns are the fact that the Pashtun the Pashtun subnationalism is something that the Pakistanis are worried about. No matter how much they have tried, you cannot separate the Pathan from the Pashtun. They are maybe they are in Peshawar, the Pathan is a Pakistani, and in Kabul the Pashtun is an Afghan. But you come closer to the border, to the Durand line, and the Pathan and the Pashtun. I'm using these phrases because it's the same thing, but to try and differentiate between the two. When you come closer to the Durand line, they merge into one. The tribes do not recognize the sanctity of the border. Of course, there are stories that the new fencing has helped and has helped. The Pakistanis are no longer concerned as much as they were about the Durand line, and they can live with this construct. And their ideal thing would be a merger, would be to get the Afghans to accept the merger or accept the Durand line. But if it doesn't happen, they're not really bothered because the fencing has come. But that is some sort of a spin that's coming across, and I'm not entirely convinced with that. There have been attempts to play the card. I know that Najibullah portrayed himself as a Pashtun nationalist, and this was emotive, virtually spread. The one card that the Afghans have is the Pashtun card, and even Karzai recognized that there is that card. He never played it because the minute you play the card, it's over. I mean, either you're toppled or it doesn't work anymore after that. But it is there. It is there, and it's emotive. There are more Pashtuns there are more Pathans in Pakistan than there are in Afghanistan. I grant that, but somehow the Pakistanis are worried about what will happen. They're also worried that in the event that the Taliban come to power in Kabul, the Taliban may choose to bolt. When I say bolt, choose to. There is no great love between the Taliban and Pakistan, the core Taliban. The bulk of them do dislike Pakistan. So that sort of that there's a concern that may spin out of control, and what happened in Waziristan could play out in a different fashion. There could be problems of Pakistan in the years to come. So they'd like to quell that in some fashion. That's the fear. And I think they're worried, deeply concerned about the PTM movement. It has the danger of spinning out of control and spilling over into Afghanistan.
So I'll bring your attention to a topic which is not directly connected to Afghanistan, but it is very important because that area is important for India, Pakistan, China, as well as Afghanistan in some respect. I'm talking about the Wakhan corridor, which has gotten recent mention by the Home Minister in one of the speeches, and Wakhan corridor has been one of the most important junctions of the Silk Route since its inception, and it's been used by the Europeans to reach the Indian plains for a lot of time. So there are recent rumors that China has deployed troops near the Little Pamir, and it is saying that it's because it's fighting the terrorism near the border of Afghanistan. But strategically speaking, how do you think China can benefit with building the corridor, just not the Silk, but strategically, how can China benefit from Wakhan corridor?
It's not a very easy area, not very hospitable. But if the Chinese manage to build a road or build something more as part of their outreach to Afghanistan, it could give them an easier ingress into or easier route. It could give them. It's actually the only route they have to Afghanistan, a contact point between the two. You're talking about the Uyghurs. Yes, just last week I read somewhere that there is an element of the Uyghurs present with the ISK, the Moawiyah's faction, in a couple of districts in Badakhshan adjoining the Wakhan corridor. There seems to be some sort of thing that's happening there. The Taliban is in control of one Warduz or Jurm, one of the two districts, and the ISK is in control of the other. I'm getting confused. Who's in control of Warduz and who's in control of Jurm? There are also a lot of Hazara Ismailis in that area. And
Correct.
in one of the districts, 20,000 Ismailis there. So that has a linkage to Gilgit and Baltistan on one area, because they are also connected with Gilgit and Baltistan. All these things are there, how it's playing it out. There is, strangely enough, since there is activity happening in that part of Badakhshan, I wonder, I really have no answer, but I think there is, I don't know what's really, it defeats me, it beats me what's really happening there. There are, as I said, some large number of Uyghurs said to be present there. They would naturally be present there. And obviously all these things would cause concern to China, and their positioning troops or their underwriting the expenses of a Afghan army unit there is logical. It fits in with their own concerns. From the Chinese point of view, I would say that I don't see anything untoward happening. From the Chinese side happening. Nothing that we should see. Of course, if you open up that route, then it benefits Pakistan in some ways. You could have a shorter route. I mean, if it falls into control of some pro-Pakistani elements, you could have a shorter route, more direct route to not only Central Asia, to Central Asia, presumably. Yes, of course, you would have a route from Chitral side to Central Asia. Yeah, that's
Okay. All right. So I think this was the end of the Afpak theater question.
okay.
So you said about the 4 point. I'll just take you back to Kashmir for a while, and then we will discuss about one more thing. So the 4 point formula that you said which was proposed by Musharraf was a line that could have been explored by us to contain the conflict, and which you said that cannot be called very, very sensible, but yet it can be welcomed in some or the other way. So what does that say? That we failed in some or the other way? Did we lose a window of opportunity?
There's that phrase which says ships at sea. It's literally that. When we are ready, they are not ready. When they are ready, we have not been ready. And this has happened many times in the past. I think there was a window when Manmohan and Musharraf were there. I think the Prime Minister, the Indian Prime Minister, was somebody who could have taken this further. But there was I'm not sure he got the support from within his own party. I'm not sure that he got the support of the bureaucracy or the politicians or bureaucracy or the army. I don't know the thing, but I will say this, that I don't think he was. Everybody tries to make out a story that Manmohan was going along because he wanted to visit Gah. That's not true. That's not at all true. He was looking at it as an opportunity, and he looked at it as something that could be explored. That it was not entirely explored is a different matter. Now, if you tell me that whether we have lost the opportunity, we know we haven't. It still exists in some fashion. It's there. It's on the card. It's not been repudiated by either side. The Pakistanis have to see a window, see a possibility that India will respond and make an offer. And we have to see a chance that Pakistan will respond, and we take a chance. At the moment, I don't think Bajwa would. I don't know what the army feels about it. Currently, but about a year ago, or let me say, when Mr. Modi came to power 6 years ago, the Pakistanis were cock-a-hoop because they felt that this is a golden opportunity for them, and there was a continuation of the Vajpayee doctrine could happen, and that Mr. Modi, with his parliamentary majority, will be able to hammer through something. 3 years ago,
misjudged.
Exactly. 2 years or 3 years ago, when I went for my when I had one interaction, I think about 2 years ago, when I met the Pakistanis in some location, that they were out of that loop. They had given up on this government. So that sort of thing happens. We've also probably given up on this government because we feel that, I don't know, we feel that Imran Khan, it's a split government, but I would also say that it is the army means a lot more. Army is a factor today. The army is running the show behind Imran Khan, and maybe there's an opportunity here. But we have to see whether frankly, Bajwa has not got his extension as yet. Imran Khan has not signed the papers as yet. So we don't know. We don't know whether Bajwa has been able to consolidate himself or we have to wait for some more time before we take another call on it. And of course, Mr. Modi in Delhi has to take the next step. Has to. Well, it can't be in single one hand clapping. It has to be both sides. And I don't know whether we are ready to move in that direction. How does it play out with the BJP's election fortunes? All that. All those are. There are many imponderables. One fine day, I wouldn't be surprised if one fine day both sides sit down and say, okay, we are going to talk. That can happen. Or one fine day, it could be more. There could be more hostilities. I have absolutely no way of predicting either side.
This is more of a question that's coming from the fact of, since you're talking about Kashmir, I want to ask you this, that a lot of the means like ideology behind Kashmir or the pro-Pakistan fraction, whether it's the Hizbul or whether it's the other fractions, which has fought, is because for the whether one is for independence or whether it's for joining Pakistan. But there has been a new fraction from Zakir Musa or Zakir Rashid Bhatt, who was a former Hizbul Mujahideen commander. And he went on to found India's Al-Qaeda wing, which is Ansar Ghazwat-ul-Hind. So do you see a shift in the ideology for the war that's going on in Kashmir from independence to pro-Islamic state? And how does it affect India's strategy for counterterrorism?
Bravo.
I wish I could really answer that. I've been out of touch, and what little contact I have with the valley is not really there anymore. I live in Bangalore, and the valley is too far away. And what I read in the papers is exactly what you guys read. And I don't think anybody, except a few people in Delhi, anybody else is wiser, not having any contact. There's no telephonic contact. A few bits and pieces come through, but you must have read my piece. I have my own views. I don't want to bring that into this issue here. I think I'm the wrong person to answer that question.
Okay, sir. So this will be the last question on Kashmir as we talk. So I think it was September when you predicted, when the lockdown was last year in September, when the lockdown of Kashmir was going on after the abrogation of Article 370. And you very, very rightfully predicted that it might extend for the next 6 months, that the situation might trigger the whole scenario up in Kashmir, which actually happened. And we saw the consequences pretty much recently in Handwara and later in Kulgam and Pulwama and recently in Pampore as well. So I was in Srinagar 2 years back, and I was talking to one of the gentlemen there, and he said the government has removed the fear of dying from us Kashmiris. It has been taken to that level, and I was very, very surprisingly taken by the comment of that gentleman, because he happens to be a very moderate person. So what I personally see is that moderates are also shifting toward a bit of extremist ideology, which is absolutely against our interests. And I mean, you were very right when you said that situation will fire up, things will be triggered. And so how do you see it going? That is one question which is very unclear right now. The answer is very unclear. How do we see things going ahead? Is the whole muscle flexing policy of the current NDA government really working out?
I don't know. I don't think it has. I think the only time we have seen some amount of in the recent past, that is the last 2010, well, let's say from 2000 onwards, has been largely during Vajpayee's days, when Vajpayee came out with his Insaniyat, Kashmiriyat, and Jamhuriyat.
Mm-hmm.
That made an impact. That really made an impact. You must remember that when Mr. Modi came to power, there were sweets being distributed in Srinagar. We've lost that opening for now. You made a point about fear of dying. I have something similar to say, but that's a different one. I shan't use the name, but somebody told me that the Kashmiri says, "Ab marna hai to marenge, but ab to this is not the time to die. We will choose a time and a place for our death." I don't know how valid that is, because that's not but that fits in a sense with your thing. But like I agree with Mr. Dulat in many ways, and when he said that the Kashmiri is always ready to talk, of course he's ready to talk.
Exactly. Yeah.
You you need to reach out to him, talk to him. He is not. It hasn't reached that point where he's not going to. You pushed him beyond the point, and he's never going to talk to you. There still is place and time. Not much time, but we can claw back and start some sort of a dialogue.
So IB assigned one interlocutor for the Kashmir dialogues, Mr. Dineshwar Sharma, who was also the former chief. I mean, I don't know very much how the progress is going on, but I haven't heard so much interesting about the whole process. And do you think that we will be very, very humiliated once we go there and talk?
At the moment, after August 5th, yes. We'll have to do a lot of running around, scampering around to talk. But there will be people to talk. You can start somewhere. You can make a start somewhere. Start low level. Go on. Try and reach out. Don't humiliate people, Humiliation is something, you may hurt a person, but when you humiliate a person, that lasts longer. That sense of humiliation. That's my only thing. You talk to them, they are different. For 70 years, you've been treating them as a different entity. Now you can't say suddenly, no, you're actually us. We are the same.
Yeah.
And even your arguments are invalid. You keep saying that an Indian can't buy land in Kashmir. But that's not the only state. You have half a dozen states in India where you and I can't buy property there. You and I can't. Yeah. 371 and 6th schedule, both of them are there. 6th schedule governs Meghalaya and I think some other states, and 371 governs other entities in India. I think there are about 9 states in India where you and I can't buy property. That's that. What did they have? I mean, I've written, the only thing they really had 370 stood for was a flag and a flag. That's it, basically. A flag also was...
A constitution.
A constitution. The constitution had been so so badly. What shall I say? I mean, there was the Indian constitution has. I had figures of 300 and odd clauses or something like that. Now it's 442. It had 300 and something, of which 270 were applicable to Kashmir. Had been made applicable to. 120 or 130 or maybe even 150, I don't have the exact figures now, were not applicable to Kashmir, not because we did not do it. It's because the Kashmir constitution had the same clauses. So you don't need to bring it. Okay? And then they say, I remember seeing somebody and saying, brings RT into the state. These people don't realize that the Kashmiris had RT even much before that, us. They had a free education dating back. They've always had free education, so they don't need an RTE. So those were the issues there, and they say that their constitution says that you can have an assembly poll once in 6 years. This was an argument thrown at me, and I said, that's true. We can do it only. We have 5 years, and how have they got 6 years? Then I went and looked at the Sikkim constitution. The Sikkim merger. Sikkim, you are allowed to have their assemblies for 4 years. So there is a hodgepodge. There is something. We should iron it out, and we could have done it. And so what if they have okay?
One last question before we end the session today. You said that you meet Pakistan on the secret location, and let me tell some of our viewers about what goes really in those secret location, if I may. So there is a whole channel of track two dialogues that exist between Indian and Pakistan officials, which is basically a kind of non-diplomatic conversation, I would rather say, between retired officials, journalists, academicians, scholars, officers of military, and many of that. And I'm glad that Mr. Arni has himself been present in many of those occasions talking with the Pakistani backfront. In fact, I would also like to say that the whole Atal Bihari Vajpayee's Lahore bus ride was also one of the results that came from the Tattoo channels. And Mr. Arni, sir, I think you should give some more insight into the track two. How does it go? How things come out of it? And now, what is your personal reservation about how Pakistanis behave pre and post retirement?
Track 2 is not secret at all. It is fairly in the open. It's in the open. It's just that we don't, nobody really addresses. Quite a few of us are right after the event, but before we don't write. I mean, there are at least about half a dozen track 2s between India and Pakistan, organized by different organizers. There's Bajwa, there's Chowpraya, there's the Ottawa Dialogue, of which I am part of. We meet about 3 to 4 times a year in different locations, wherever visas are available. I am on a track 2 which actually covers Afghanistan. So it's in India, Pakistan and Afghanistan track 2. I used to be on a track 2 with Pakistan, but that's no longer there. You have to choose one of the two. I prefer to be on the Afghan thing. Not that I chose, it's just that it so happened. The attitude of the Pakistani, okay, once you realize, I was posted in Pakistan in 89 to 92 when for 2 years the DGISI then used to be Mr. Asad Durrani, General Asad Durrani. And I met him in one of these track 2 events. And
Which was supposed to be held in Bangkok, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, that was held in Bangkok. Yeah, and that track 2, I've realized that actually he's a great man to sit with. He's no different from me. He doesn't have horns. He's a nationalist. He thinks about his own country, much like as I think about my own country. He's got his country's interests. Maybe that's all a charade or a make-believe, but to me he's been that sort of a person. And actually I find all the Pakistanis much in that similar fashion. And when you get outside a session, in the session they probably present a Pakistani perspective. Outside the session there is a much more realistic attitude, even in the sessions inside, they do tell you their concerns. That is the source of, that is the track 2 actually. That you get to know their concerns and you must find a way to address it. There is no other way of getting to know their concerns. Why is it that the whole thing of being cheated out of Kashmir, how does it spell out? How does it think? What is the concerns that if they do give in to India on Kashmir, why are they so worried that it could spill over to other areas? And they also get a sense of our own concerns. There is a worry about our democratic process, how it's going to play out. Issues that they wouldn't be able to pick up, or even if they get, it's good for them to hear directly from an Indian, and for us to hear from a Pakistani. In their system, it feeds into the system, in their way of thinking. They go and give, and since there are ISI officers and army officers, it goes into a report is sent, and it doesn't form policy. It's just an awareness that comes in. Similarly, in our side, somebody or the other does go and informally brief somebody in power that this is what the Pakistanis, we went for this session and this is the perception that came through. It just helps create a better awareness. That's it. You keep a channel alive.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
sir, we just have one guest question coming in. So we put up this story saying that we'll be interviewing you, and we got a lot of questions. Most of them we have covered. So just one interesting question that I think you can address to the larger audience, that uh, there's a gun market in Pakistan tribal areas which was accessible to the local people as well as outsiders who used to visit, but after a point it was stopped and it became a black market. But it is a home base for Taliban since the US invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, and majority of the weapon that comes in comes from there. So the Pakistan government denies that it exists, but we all know that it's there. So how do India diplomatically can tackle the problem to stop the illegal arms transportation?
I don't think Dara is as much responsible for the arms that are flowing into Afghanistan. Yes, they have some. I think much of it is refurbishing of weapons and stuff that goes on, but they're in small numbers, not enough to outfit. They're okay to outfit a couple of dakus or dacoits in Sindh or other places, or provide weapons to certain tribes, but not in that numbers that were required for the Taliban. There are enough weapons flying. If you want to go, you go to Afghanistan, go with some money. I'm sure you can pick up a lot of weapons.
Yeah, I saw the street markets there as well.
It's not an issue at all. You don't need to give any weapons to the Afghans. They've got enough. They've had it for the last 50 years, and it will be there.
In fact, they have the very 303 that the police here we are using. So that is very interesting. All right, sir. It was absolutely a phenomenal session that lasted for almost 1.5 hours, even more than that. So it was great talking to you, and it was quite a privilege for us as well. So to listening to a former officer who has served from the ground